Hello, everyone. I am Ryan Madsen, the author of the Crooked Rock and Crooked Rock Legends book series, and today I am going to be reading the first chapter of my latest book, Crooked Rock Legends Secret of the Attic. Chapter 1. There I was, sitting in the back seat of my car, staring out the window at my new house. A tall, two-story house made of red bricks. Smoke floated from the long chimney that sat on top of the black-tiled roof. Had someone left the fire going inside? I wondered. Who cares? That was the least of my concerns. Ever since my parents told me we were moving, I haven't been happy at all. I didn't want to move in the first place, because moving houses also meant changing schools. It took me forever to find friends at my last school. Now it's going to take me forever to find new friends. I hate to admit it, but I'm not the most popular kid around. I'm short and skinny, I've got messy red hair that always likes to stick up, and I wear plain clothes. I was certain I was going to have trouble fitting in. It's all my dad's fault that we had to move. He got a new job in this small, creepy town. Apparently the job he had at our old place wasn't good enough for him. I knew he could tell I was upset. The whole way here he kept trying to cheer me up by saying things like, "Jack, you're really gonna like this new house. It's gigantic." Or, "I hear the new town has a lot of fun stuff to do." But I don't care about that. I wanted to stay in our old town with my old house, my old friends, and my old school. "Well, are you guys ready to go see the new house?" my dad asked, climbing out of the driver's seat. He had the biggest smile on his face. At least someone was happy. "I can't wait," my mom said. She climbed out of the passenger seat and followed my dad to the front steps. Before reaching the front door, she turned back to the car and looked at me. "Jack, get out of the car and come check out the house," she said. I rolled my eyes. That was the last thing I wanted to do. I still had a little hope that they would go inside, decide they didn't like the new house, and take me home. Our old home. But things weren't looking so good. I saw my mom flash a great big smile as soon as she stepped inside. I could already tell she loved it. It didn't take much to impress her. I let out a heavy sigh and unbuckled my seatbelt. I pushed open the car door and stepped onto the asphalt driveway. I was surprised to see how smooth it was. Our old driveway was full of cracks and bumps. There was even a giant hole right when you turned into the driveway that my dad hit several times. As I slowly approached the house, I looked up at it again. I'll admit, it was nicer than our old house, but I still wasn't happy about moving. Our old house was pretty small. It sat on the end of a cul-de-sac. This house was the complete opposite. It sat by itself with no other house in sight. In front of the house was a garden full of rose bushes. The roses stood tall, covering the big arched windows. I walked up the front steps and headed through the front door. I stepped into the giant living room. It had to be twice as big as our entire old house. The floors were covered in shiny wood, so shiny I could see my reflection. I knew that wouldn't last long. They were probably cleaned before the house went up for sale. To the left of the front door was a brick fireplace. It was made of the same red bricks as the rest of the house. The fire danced and crackled inside the fireplace, and since it was the middle of February, the heat from the fire felt nice and warm. Sitting in the middle of the living room were two couches in the shape of an L, and next to them was a coffee table. All new furniture. My mom had insisted on getting new furniture since we were moving. Once again, I would have preferred to keep the old furniture. I heard a clacking sound coming from down the hallway. Mom stepped through the doorway, still looking around in awe. "Well, what do you think, Jack?" she asked. "I want to go back to our old house," I told her, practically begging. I could tell she didn't like that answer. "Jack, you are going to have to adjust," she said. "We've already paid for this house. We can't go back now." "It's too big," I said. "Who needs this much house? This place would be perfect for giants, not us." "Jack, that's enough," she snapped. She hated it when I would complain about stuff. But I hated it when she and Dad forced me to do stuff I didn't want to do, like moving. "Give us some time," she said, heading out the front door. "I'm sure you'll get used to it after a couple of nights. Then you'll be glad we moved." Yeah, right, I thought. "Go explore the rest of the house, then come give your dad and me a hand unloading the car." She headed outside to grab some boxes from the trunk. I turned around and started down the hallway. There wasn't much light, so I could hardly see where I was going. The only light came from the bedroom windows. I stopped and poked my head in one of the bedrooms. It was pretty big, but empty. The only thing that stood out was the closet in the back corner of the room and a giant window. White curtains fluttered across the window. I continued down the hallway until I reached another room. This time it was the bathroom. It was kind of small. One toilet, one sink, and one small bathtub all crammed into one tiny room. Above the sink hung a mirror that nearly filled the entire wall. Something about that mirror gave me the creeps. "I see you found the bathroom," Dad said from behind me. Startled, I nearly fell in the tub. "Have you seen your room yet?" he asked. "Not yet," I replied, my heart still racing from the scare. "It's on the second floor," he said. "The first room on the left. Why don't you go check it out?" "Sure, Dad." I pushed past him and continued down the hallway. At the end was a staircase that led to the second floor. I grabbed the handrail. It sent a chill up my arm. I followed the stairs up to the next floor. When I reached the top, I turned left down the hallway. The first room on the left was my room. I grabbed the doorknob and pushed the door open. It let out a chilling squeak. Great, I thought. Not only was this house giant, my door also makes creepy noises. What's next? Is this place haunted? If there was one thing I've learned from watching scary movies, it's that the big houses always hide the scariest secrets. I stepped inside my new room and looked around. It was similar to the room I saw downstairs. Big and empty. It also had a closet in the corner, and a big window. I took off my jacket and tossed it on the floor. I stepped across the creaking floorboards and made my way toward my closet. I pulled the door open and looked inside. It was completely empty. Hanging from the closet was a long string. I pulled the string and a yellow light flashed on, nearly blinding me. With the light on, I could see spider webs hanging from every corner. I yanked the string to turn the light off and slammed the door shut. I left my new room to help my parents unpack, but when I stepped back into the hallway, something caught my eye. At the far end of the hallway, a ladder hung from the ceiling. It led up to an old attic. Our old house didn't have an attic, so I was kind of curious to see what it looked like up there. I'm sure my parents would be fine unpacking by themselves, I thought as I started up the ladder. The steps were covered in a thick layer of dust. I expected to see footprints in the dust, but there weren't any. It was as if no one had used the ladder in ages. Once I reached the top, I carefully poked my head into the attic. It was mostly dark except for the small window in the back of the room. I climbed inside and started looking around. The room was full of dust-covered boxes. I looked through a few but only found some old junk. One was full of books that must have been centuries old. When I stepped deeper into the attic, I heard a strange squeaking sound coming from above me. I looked up, but it was too dark to see anything. Then I noticed another string hanging in the middle of the room, just like the one in my closet. I pulled it and a bright light flashed on. Big mistake. When I did that, a swarm of bats dropped from the ceiling and started flying around my head. "Shoo!" I cried. "Get out of here!" I swatted my hands in the air, trying to scare them away. I must have interrupted their nap because they weren't happy. The bats continued flying around me, squeaking and flapping their wings. Then I had an idea. I ran over to the window at the far end of the attic and threw it open. It opened easily, and I watched as all the bats flew out. I let out a huge sigh of relief and dropped to the ground. That was when I noticed something on the wall hidden behind a stack of boxes. I got up off the floor and went over to the stack of boxes. I removed the boxes from the stack one by one. Behind them was a door. What was a door doing in the attic? I wondered. It looked just like a bedroom door. I reached for the doorknob, my hand shaking nervously. I grabbed it and started to turn it, but I quickly stopped. Was this a good idea? I wondered. I swallowed hard and continued turning the knob. There probably wasn't anything to worry about. The worst thing I could find was more bats. I slowly pulled the door open. It let out a loud squeak, just like every other door. I poked my head through to look on the other side. It looked like more of the attic. But why was there a door splitting the attic in two? I started to step through when I heard a voice. A deep, booming voice. "What are you doing?" it said angrily. My heart sank to the pit of my stomach. I had a feeling I had just made a big mistake. If you want to find out what happens next, you can get the book now on Amazon in both paperback and ebook. And thanks to everybody who stuck around to the end of chapter 1. I hope you look forward to reading the rest of the book.